To introduce Mr. John Touhey, a filmmaker, writer, director, and content creator based in New Jersey, USA. I'm fortunate to meet him and have opportunity to have a short conversation with him about recent changes and how that will impact entertainment industry specifically and other areas as well. So, John, welcome.
Thank you.
And with your vast experience in the entertainment and filmmaking, I would like to see what changes you have seen in last few years and how you see that might be impacting entertainment industry in general.
Yeah, well, you know, the entertainment industry, like every 10 years in my experience, decades of experience now, every 10 years, the entertainment industry goes through massive changes. In fact, it's probably the industry that is always changing the most constantly. But there have been particular changes now that are really having a massive impact. And, you know, that partly due to COVID as well, of course. But I would say the first thing and the biggest thing is streaming. How streaming has it. I don't know how it is in other countries, but certainly in the United States, streaming has become the main way that people receive their content, and that means television content, where the people had broadcast television or cable. They're now getting most of that content through streaming services, and for films, that's very true as well. Like fewer people are going to the movie theaters. And they're having a lot of trouble getting people into theaters because people know that they can just stream the films in their houses. So that streaming has had like a distribution effect. And then the second thing that—
I mean, that the streaming thing, I fully agree, because having my Indian roots, Bollywood is a big kind of industry in terms of entertainment. And since COVID has come, everything has changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
People who actually used to go mainly to theaters, cinema, they are watching streaming services.
Absolutely.
And not only Bollywood, because of that, they have started watching variety of content, not only the Hindi cinema and Bollywood, but they're watching, all languages and different areas, and that definitely having actually impact on the movie.
It is absolutely, because the budgets have to adjust to that, because if you have like a streaming service, and almost every Hollywood studio has its own streaming service at this point, but they all try to have their own streaming service. That's the ideal. It has been the ideal. But there's so many streaming services, people can only, it's like here, it's about $7 to $10 American dollars a month to stream. So you can't, the average person is not might have 3-4 streaming services. So they'll have Amazon, the streaming service, then there's Disney Plus, there's Paramount, there's HBO. So there's like so many different services. So most people are not, and Apple has its own service now. So people can't have all this. So there's this competition. So people will get a service for a couple of months, binge watch things, then change to another service and binge watch those. So it really affects the industry in such a way that they're losing a lot of money on these streaming services, even though everybody's going on to them, because it's not consistent, and they're pouring so much money into these streaming services in order to try to draw viewers to their service, that they can't make money at it. Yeah. So for instance, Disney in the past couple of weeks have announced that they're going to cut back their budgets on streaming and try to pour more money into films because they can make more profit there. But who knows if that's going to work? Because people get into the habit then of watching things at home, and it completely changes.
And you can see the changes, because before, at least what I can see in Bollywood, before the leading actor, they would not kind of going for the streaming kind of programs. But now they are open.
Yeah,
You know,
all the stars now do streaming content.
and that's a clear indication that it's having impact.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
so obviously streaming is the one. What else?
Then I would say in a less direct, but kind of we're really on the cusp of this, is what some people call deep fakes, where you're kind of you can create the image of an actor, and so you're able to recreate an actor's performance. You can take an older actor and make them young again. So for instance, there's like Harrison Ford is having an Indiana Jones movie coming out this summer. And at the beginning of the movie, they're de-aging him to his 40-year-old self. And from what I've seen, it looks really good. At first that technology was a little bit rough. You could see, and it's getting better and better. And so now they're able to really recreate actors' performances. And that was like a kind of a science fiction idea where you saw, like I was reading I like science fiction. And I like 20, 30 years ago, I was reading, like you would read science fiction about like, oh, they could recreate Humphrey Bogart or some famous old Hollywood actor, same with Bollywood actor, you could do it, passed away, and you could just recreate the performance. Well, they're getting closer and closer to that actually being able to happen. And so what that means is that a lot of the skill set that we have used in animation, which then went into CGI animation, is now being applied to live action and to actors' performances. And so, that's already having an impact. It's maybe not as noticeable, in some ways, but it subtly changes what they can do with films, what they can do with content. And then, for instance, in a related way, now they use, like there's a Star Wars series called The Mandalorian. So they now have virtual sets where the actors can go in to a virtual environment and interact with all the things, and they can recreate the sets there. So that's a major change, also in production, because now you can recreate any kind of set, any kind of environment, and the actors can go in there and the lighting matches what that environment is. Whereas before, like 10, 15, even 5 years ago, they would have used what's called a blue screen or a green screen, where the actors would have stood in front of that, and then later they would put the background in, and now they're live in the studio, recording thing. And so that is really an exciting thing from a filmmaking standpoint, because and from a studio standpoint, because they can, for lower budgets, you can create these environments, and it's better for the actors because they can see what's going on around them and stuff. So and that doesn't just affect special effects movies. That can be a film set in New York City today, and they can't. It's it's very, like if you want to film in New York City, for instance, it's very expensive. You have to shut down the city. You have to get all these permits. It's a lot of money. So if you can just bring your cameras in quickly, film an environment, and then bring it back to the studio and have the actors there, and you can spend all day, you can spend 3 days there, and you're having to spend all the money of shutting down that part of the city for 3 days.
So basically you're saying that making things more accessible,
yes,
both economically as well as to wider kind of organizations. So now not only those has biggest resources can do that, but even smaller.
And like most technologies like that, it's like, for instance, digital camera technology was, at first that was something that only a big studio could really afford, and then independent filmmakers could use like cruder digital cameras. Like the first film I ever made was on a very crude digital camera. Now, as a filmmaker, I can get a very tiny, very accessible camera, and it's 4K, sometimes 6 or 8K. It's very affordable, and you can make something that looks absolutely gorgeous digitally, recreated digitally. And so every technology kind of, so I would say that kind of virtual set technology is too expensive for independent filmmakers right now, but in another 10 years, who knows? It'll probably be much cheaper.
Right. So I mean, in the same way, the very recent development, for example, ChatGPT, generative AI.
Yeah.
What about that? How that going to play role in whole of entertainment industry, particularly writing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something I'm not sure that I have a really good answer to, because it's like puzzling, you know? So I had an experience of this where because I was curious, you know, that's something it's so recent, it's so new. Like to me, at least, I don't know, maybe other people have a different experience, but this is something I became aware of 2 months ago. You know, I had no idea. I think most people, like, it's even like it's something that every day you're like, what can it do? What? So really about a month ago, after reading a little bit about this, I was very curious. So I got onto ChatGPT, and first, you know, I was like, well, let me ask it some informational things. And so I was like, from a story point of view, so I was asking it, you know, what are the elements of a good story? And it came up with some really interesting answers, you know, about narrative and character and dialogue, and it said all the right things. It gave a great answer. You know, there were things I was like, oh yeah, I didn't really. That's right. Yeah, that's true. I didn't really, you know, I wouldn't have given that answer right immediately, but it was good. And so I kept asking it, well, what about this one? Can you give me an example of this? And if it was like really simple things, like it could give me a simple, like it would give me an example of a film where that was used. So it would be like a classic film that everybody knew, that it had pulled out from. I don't know exactly how it works, because I'm not a tech person that way, but it from the information that was at hand, the data was able to plot. Then I went into the next step. So I was like, now let me see. Can you tell me? Back up. So it told me some information. It gave me an example of a film with a bootlegger in it. And a bootlegger was a person in the 1920s who there was prohibition here in the United States. You couldn't sell alcohol. So bootleggers ran alcohol illegally across state lines and stuff, and sold liquor illegally. So he gave me this example. So then I said, could you write a story for me? Tell me a story about a bootlegger? Just because I was curious. And because at that point I was becoming a little bit threatened, because I was like, how intelligent is this thing? How good is this thing? So then it gave me a story about a bootlegger, and it was a story, and you saw it was applying all the proper things. But it was a story like the level of information was about at a high school freshman level, and the writing ability was at the 4th grade level, you know, of a 4th grader, maybe, you know, it was done in a very stilted, not good way. And at that point I was a little more relaxed, because I felt like this is not a threat to me, at least right now, you know, because it doesn't really know the human elements of, No, I mean, the word no is very dangerous to use, kind of word. But
so basically, we can say that there is no direct threat, immediate threat. However, as this application matures and become more sophisticated, so more and more learning happens, better it will become.
It will become good. I think, so my prediction is that it will be good at generating very generic kind of content, popular content, like the kind of thing where, for instance, if you like to read mystery stories and you go to the bookstore, for instance, and there's like tons of mystery stories, and like they're written like the writer writes them in a month, you know, and there's just like tons of them out there. I think that they will get to the point where an AI system can churn out these things left and right easily in a few minutes. They can put a cover on them and all those things. So that kind of content, I think, is in danger. Right. Creative content, which is really creative, where it's like someone is doing something original, someone is creating a mood in a very subtle way. I am skeptical that you can simulate this. Maybe you can, and I think you could probably, for instance, what I think you could do is, like, you could probably feed, if you had the entire body of work of an author, you could probably feed it in and then get it to simulate another book that author had written.
Right.
But in a way that would be not like, it would just be like a repeat of everything that's done before. So not in a, like, it wouldn't feel like, oh, this author's done something new and fresh. which is what you want.
It would be the reflection of what author has done.
Yes, exactly.
Not the new thing.
Not nothing.
Not the new thing.
No, there would be no growth.
Yeah.
No. Now, maybe you can go to the next thing and say, now simulate if you had done this. I mean, I don't know, but I think the one thing missing is that as a writer, what you're trying to do, you're trying to evoke something for the reader.
Absolutely.
And the effect that word or that use of words, those phrases and whatever have on the reader. And you're communicating something from inside you, and like your writing is only good if you're communicating something from your heart.
Yeah.
Really trying to communicate something important to you. And that is like, I don't think you can't simulate it. Maybe you could create an AI you would need to create an AI with a conscience, with a heart, with desire, with emotions, and with experience, I think, real experience.
That AI is not there.
Yeah, no, it's not there yet.
General AI, general intelligence is not there yet, and it would not be there for next probably 20, 30 years, as they say.
And it might, personally, I'm skeptical that it might ever be there because to me, a human being is more than a bunch of numbers and a bunch of things. I think a human being is a desire for something infinite. I'm kind of skeptical that it will ever be that kind of threat.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's a lot of things I wouldn't have foreseen, so I can't.
I
feel like a bad predictor.
This threat is for the routine jobs, something that can be easily done, repeated. Those things might see the impact, but actual creativity.
Yeah, I mean, literature, literature. I mean, again, you could have something fake, a piece of literature, a piece of avant-garde literature, for instance, like Finnegan's Wake. You could fake that, but I kind of think, what's the point of that? What's the point? Because people want to be in a relationship with an author too. You want to feel like you want to feel like you're following an author. You're in the kind of relationship that they're speaking to you, and that's something you don't really want that from a machine or
Yes. So we can take comfort that nothing is going to be so threatening and so radically different.
I would say I'm not sure. I try to be agnostic about these kinds of things, and I would like to believe that it's not a threat in that sense, but there's a part of me that wants to watch out and be curious if it could be.
Right.
Because I think for many people, there are a lot of people who just eat like popcorn, hear popcorn or potato chips. They just want their art that. And so for that, you can produce that. I think you can produce that. So we'll see.
Yeah. So just one last thing. You mentioned about use of virtual environments for movie making. How you see the use of metaverse, for example. So at the moment, it's localized virtual environments, right? Specific one, different people using for their purpose. But what about the wider metaverse that emerging? Of course, they're still not yet there, but they're emerging. And, lots of commercial organizations setting up their shops or their branches or their businesses. Also, the industrial units, for example, they're creating digital twins for manufacturing units. So when you want to optimize or want to spot an error, what is going on in manufacturing unit, it takes time. Or when something broken down, then only you can actually find out it had broken down, and then only you can fix it. But now they're creating digital twins. Means the virtual replica of their manufacturing unit in the metaverse. Many big car manufacturing businesses have done that already. And the purpose is to optimize the function as well as to spot the error before it happens, so that it can be fixed before. So that will obviously avoid the damages. What would you see, if anything, from entertainment industry? Are they going to use it apart from obviously what we can see that concerts or music events and those are things that are happening.
Gaming.
Yeah, gaming.
Gaming is a big
gaming is already there, and that's in big way. You know, lots of those platforms are there, Roblox, Fortnite, I know many others actually, where gaming is already very prominent. But what about like in terms of movie production or any other those kind of
I think that is something that is further down the line for movie making. It would have, I think the virtual environments that you create would have to match what people are in detail, would have to match what people are seeing on their screens in 2D or 3, in 3D with glasses or whatever. But if you ever get to the point where you can generate that much information, where it can really create that kind of realism, I think then it becomes a tool that filmmaking can really use in terms of a final product. Now, there might be, it's very interesting, your example of the manufacturers using that. So maybe, and I'm just thinking of this because you mentioned it, but it could be kind of interesting where you could use it as a pre-production tool right now, where you could go in and maybe, like if you're going into, like if I'm going on to, and if I have to go to like a location, for instance, I can recreate the location, I can figure out where the camera angles are and everything, and I can set everything up and run through all the action and whatnot. And I think that could be a very interesting tool for it.
And also, for example, when you are choosing a site, not everything is desirable there, right? So you can actually use augmented reality to superimpose, overlay certain information to hide certain things, and or to project certain things.
And they're already, like in 2-dimensional production, they're already doing, they're already doing that. They're really good at like manipulating environments that already exist. I mean, it's amazing. Like every single thing you're seeing on your screen, there are probably hundreds of things, even like a film that takes place in a local neighborhood that you're familiar with, there may be hundreds of things that are being changed in there because so many things go wrong when you're filming. There's so many things that you don't want when you're directing and filming, and cars go by and airplanes. And so you take those things out. You might say, oh, I want a tree over there. And so that they're very used to manipulating environments now. So that's kind of happening. So I'll be curious to see, like, I mean, I do think every tool that you can possibly find, people in the film industry eventually find a use for, pretty much, if it's good. So I think there will be uses for it. But as I said, I think like in terms of like people going, like watching a virtual movie and stuff, like if you could go like to Avatar, but it was really not just 3D, but like really you could feel like it was really
I was going to ask, like, in terms of the last mile, like the people go to theater at the moment, right? What about the virtual theaters in Metaverse, where actually people join through their avatars and they watch that in virtual format? And the advantage, of course, disadvantage is that you're not going to have the real effect or real experience.
You can't smell the popcorn in
exactly. but then the advantage is that at the moment, if film releases in US, obviously people cannot watch other part of the world. But if that happens, people may able to join from different parts of the world.
It's possible.
It's a cross-border, there's no geographical boundaries, and people from different places can enjoy the movie at the same time.
And you could have like Bollywood fans, for instance, in New Jersey or New York, and they could get together with friends in India, and you can form clubs and stuff and see things together. That's a possibility.
Very, very good, actually, kind of example that when Bollywood movie releases, obviously it releases first in India and then not necessarily releases same time in different parts of the world, where actually Indians are now spread everywhere. Now, if that happens, they want to probably take the experience at the first day. And if that option is available, and if they cannot get in theater, they probably go to virtual theater. So obviously, I haven't heard anything yet, but it was just a thought. Something like.
Yeah, and I think like we're probably, I mean, my impression is we're kind of at the stage like when the Wright brothers built we're kind of at the place of the metaverse where when the Wright brothers built their first airplane, right? And you know, people then probably couldn't even see today's jetliners with the, you know, or any of the airplanes that are existing today. You couldn't like really imagine them. Or if you imagine them in a kind of a clunky way. And so, you know, I think probably 30 years down the line, 40 years down the line, we're going to be like, whoa, that's like you could maybe make a virtual film. And that would be kind of, it would be interesting from a creative point of view. Like how can you use these tools to tell a story where people have much more control over what they're looking at and where they're looking at stuff. And it'd be much more kind of a combination of film today and the theater, for instance, maybe.
Right. I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation.
I did too.
And any last thoughts about younger generation who is actually at the moment going through their education and entering to their life and career, you know, in next few years? Any thoughts, any guidance, what they should?
Well, I think in many ways, like young people, now technology changes so fast that you end up following. You're like looking at what are young people doing so you can follow them from a technological point of view, because they handle, every time a new technology comes up, the younger generation, like I have young sons, teenage sons, and they're much more adaptable at things that are coming out new, you know.
Became very late.
So in terms of that, like we have to learn from young people. What young people learn from older people and there are certain things that never change. Like, what is a good story? What is the craft of narrative? How do you like how do actors acting? How do you work with actors? How do you build a sense of environment over time and not just throw something at everybody? So there are things like that that are just craft, and those are things that are like any kind of art. You need someone with knowledge to help educate and encourage the young people, and then the young people will also teach you. But you need an educator. And you will always need an educator for those kinds of things.
But in any sense, digital tools are there, but the core concepts
never change.
They never change, and it is very important to acquire those. And then only digital tools can be effective.
Yeah, and like the stories we're telling today aren't really any different than the stories that Sophocles was telling in the ancient Greeks, or ancient Indian literature. The stories they're telling are the same stories today. We're telling the same stories. We're drawing from the same well, and we're using the same basic tools,